Okay, even though I had big plans for this next hour of time that I have before another phone appointment, I'm really following this impulse I have to take this time to visit the essence before the seed. So the origin of all of this. Where did all of this blogging and storytelling and revelation and voice finding start for me? Why is it so important for me to keep going through and developing and laboring through, in a way, to give birth to this? And it has to do with a piece of my story that I tend to either skip completely or go through very quickly in a laundry list fashion as if it were a series of events, matter of fact, but actually hold a very deep, essential experience for me that is the driver behind all of my desires to teach and share in this new way that has been in development, in process, in ripening, in various stages for my whole life, but mainly for the last 5 years. Where does this part of the story begin? Because it, of course, begins at the beginning of my life, which began before the beginning of my life. But maybe it began in 2008, 4 years after I moved to California to start my own business. I had been in a very nice, awesome position to ascend to partner level, to continue my ascension at partner level in a private equity firm back in Cleveland. And I had a house I had just bought, and I saw this road ahead of me, and I saw the paths of the people who were around me, and I just knew that it wasn't who I wanted to become the way I wanted to become it. And it wasn't a criticism or judgment of them, it was just a knowing that this wasn't my path. And I had the clarity to voice that at that time. This was a period of great confidence and strength, because I had just left. I had freed myself from the prison of the medical path, which I also knew wasn't mine. But I had found this way to be financially supported very well and to have this sort of at least material autonomy. And I was meeting all new kinds of people and learning different skills and ways of being. And I had a pivotal conversation at the time with another venture capitalist who was also an MD who had left, never practiced medicine, and he did this 15 years before me. So he was an elder. And, I had my list of people in the industry who I considered the gurus that I would want to meet someday, who were MDs and doing all these medical device deals, and, they had legendary status in my mind. I guess he was one of them. There were a few, and I ended up having a conversation with him in which I revealed, he asked, "What's your number?" And I said, "I don't know what you mean. I don't know what my number is." He said, "We all have a number in this business. 50 million, 100 million, 200 million. What is it for you? We all have a number that we get to when we know we've made it and we can stop and finally do what we really wanted to do with our lives. Pursue our passions or dreams." And I was just shocked by this, because I thought that everyone in the venture capital industry, which was the sexiest industry at the time, this is like the heart of .com time, or right after the crash, but everybody, around that time was like, ooh, the VCs are the cool people. I thought they were following their dreams. I mean, what else would you be doing? And so to hear this was like, what are you, so I was, I asked this person which dream he would pursue, and he finally had enough, whatever it was, when he got to his number, to be able to do it, and it was music. He would just pursue music. He would, whatever it is, in his way of pursuing it, take jazz piano lessons, finally, learn another instrument, write some songs, whatever. I just found that fascinating, because of course I had played music my whole life. But I heard myself say in that moment that if I had $20 million, I would open a violin school. And it was the first time I verbalized that deeply held dream that I'd had since I was 4 years old, and I saw the image of my violin teacher, who was this woman whose presence could change a room the minute she walked in. I didn't know what that was about, but I think that's what attracted me to that image. She just had command of a room. And she, she also wore high heels and wore suits and had perfectly groomed hair and makeup every day. More a product of her generation, and also her expectations and standards for herself and other people. So when I heard that come out of my mouth, it was really interesting, because then I got to say, wait a minute, do I need $20 million to start a violin school? And if and when I get to that point, maybe it'll be at the end of my career as I look back, will I have the desire and ability to actually do a violin school? And this started turning in my head, and it sort of broke down all these illusions of what I was seeing around me. And of course, it wasn't the story of every person in that industry, but it shattered my illusions because it came from the mouth of someone who I thought was an elder, and whose path was sort of one that was worthy of emulating. And I thought, gosh, I don't need to be racking up the points here. I had more idealistic reasons for being in that. I thought I could change the world by, writing the check into the next great medical device company. And that was sort of the extent of my frame of reference at that time. So it shows the limits of my imagination at that time were to what I knew and what I'd seen before. So within 6 weeks of that conversation, I was actually on a plane out here in Silicon Valley, scoping out the places. I just had this, it was just like I didn't even have to think. It was very easy for me to see where and how I would open my school. I just flew out here, stayed with my parents' friends, and did some scouting, and went home with a suitcase full of these brochures and information about the area, and started getting busy on creating the brochure, the website, the PowerPoint presentation. And I remember, sitting in partner meetings during those weeks afterwards, and just having to turn over the handouts and write my own business plan and brochure and things on the back of those notes. It was so alive for me, and it all came together very quickly for me as an image, and just flowed. And so within another 3 to 4 weeks of that initial scouting trip, I was in my partner's office, my founding partner's office, telling him, having that difficult conversation where I had to tell him that I had decided to leave, to pursue this. And I knew that I had given 300% of my commitment to that position, to that firm, for every minute that I'd been there, and I felt it was unfair to start to drift off partway through and not communicate that. And so when I went in the office, he said, since you're pursuing your dreams, we can't really stand in your way. If you'd said you were going to another firm, we would be upset. But if you're going to do what your heart tells you to do, we fully support you. And when are you going to do this? And I said, well, the next 30 days because I want to start teaching this fall. And he couldn't believe it. He thought he's like, I thought you were going to say at least 6 months from now or 5 years, maybe build up some cushion financially and then go. But no, it was then. And I couldn't deny it. I followed the impulse, and that was late in February when I had that conversation, and by March 15th I was gone. I moved out of my house, I put it on the market, packed up a moving truck, drove, first stopping at my parents' house, and then drove out to California. And on Memorial Day of 2004, and then I started teaching in the fall. I just knew I had to get out here on the ground to start to build it, and I didn't really know how. In retrospect, it was really amazing, the risks that I took, but I just knew. It didn't feel like a risk at the time. It was like it was what I needed to do. So, fast forwarding from 2014, from 2004 to 2008, it was like, I only had really like 4 months of abject terror between the fall when I started with 2 students until January of that first year when I finally had the number to break even, and I priced it at a point where I only needed 12 students to break even. So that was smart. I still had like a lot of financial sense at that time. And but I remember hitting this point in the first few months, and this just indicates how fast my mind and expectations worked at that time. I gave myself 3 months to recruit my first students, which was amazingly, I got 2, and then, another 3 months to get 10 more. And, but those 3 months where I only had 2, 3, 4 students was scary because I was just writing checks. I was paying for a mortgage in Cleveland, and I was paying for my apartment in Menlo Park, and I was paying for the space that I was teaching in. And, it's that feeling of just writing checks where you aren't really knowing when it's going to be coming back, but you're just going. And I reached a point where I just didn't know, and I remember that feeling, and it was so brief. I'm glad that I took a moment to register that, wow, this was new. This feeling that, yes, it could all fall apart, and I could just be in a situation where I have no clue how to get out of, where I'm not able to control it all. I got there briefly. I touched that place and said, this is as close to failure as I've gotten in my life. But I was buoyed somehow. It was just this unrelenting vision that I had. And it played out over a period of months, which is remarkable. And so I was able to get very comfortable with just doing my art, my teaching, right away within those 4 months, and start delivering and outperforming my expectations that I had set. And I already knew this about my product, about what I was teaching. So there was absolutely no question there. It was just about getting the people to experience in the door to experience it. And once I had them and they were the right people, I just knew I could work with them. And that's how it flowed. And the funny thing is, I think I was surprised a little bit at my ability to actually do this, because as I got into year 2 and 3 and 4, I kind of realized, wow, I really like creating things. I like starting things and doing things for the first time. When it came to like planning the trip to Chicago for the 4th time, even though it was like 70 people instead of 12, bigger scale, it was like, it wasn't as exciting to me. It was kind of disappointing that I could just take out the template from last year and do the edits, and that basically the event was the same. Now, some people really enjoy that ability to execute, and do something over and over again with consistency. What I discovered about myself was that wasn't exciting to me anymore. Once I did it 2 times, I was pretty done, and I wanted to do it a different way. But of course, working with children and families and recruiting new people on board all the time, that consistency and structure was really helpful for others. It wasn't what fed me. And I sort of noticed it at the time, but felt trapped, like I couldn't change it because that wouldn't be best for the people in the school, that I couldn't do what was serving me because I was in this role of serving them and this higher purpose that had been passed to me by my teacher. And I felt like there were certain ingredients that had to be there and I wasn't willing to experiment with. There were other rules that I had inherited from my business colleagues, which had sort of this layer of expectation that I build something quote unquote scalable. So they implanted in me this idea that, there's limited opportunity in a business where you're delivering all the value personally through your presence, and that it's not something that can be replicated, or you need to create something that's replicable, like a Starbucks model. And I was very resistant to that, although I wanted to be a cool business person. It was part of my identity to be a successful business person who, for me, the first threshold was 6 figures, who had a 6-figure income and could afford to do things and buy things. And that was very much part of my measuring stick for my success. And so to do that with a violin school is about delivering disproportionately high quality and having no competition, meaning differentiating myself so much from a quote violin teacher that this is no longer a violin experience, it's really a personal development experience. And that's what I was committed to. That's always what I wanted to do, which was to develop people, not to train violinists. That violin was a vehicle that I had that happened to be in my experience, and I chose to see it in a certain way that helped develop people. And unfortunately, I didn't have enough confidence in that vision to really, really execute on that in my own way. I was still sort of riding the coattails of my own teacher in Chicago, and she was offering all kinds of opportunities to my students to join her students, which, frankly, I will say that her experience at that school is more about training violinists. And I think that at some level deep inside her, she wants to train violinists. She would rather more of her students become violinists than what the reality is, which is that most of them go into academic fields. They have parents that are similar to mine who say music is an enrichment activity, but you shouldn't try to pursue it as a profession. You should do something like doctor, lawyer, engineer. And a lot of these kids achieve at a pretty high level academically, and they have those options. So it's that was the dynamic in her school. So there wasn't as much emphasis on character development and leadership and communication that I was very aware of from having just been me and having been in the business world and watching CEOs and dealing with a lot of CEOs. So I was very in tune with leadership and the ingredients of leadership. And I saw these kids that were studying with me as future leaders. They were sons and daughters of leaders, and presumably these parents had the same desire to instill these habits in their children. So I kind of got co-opted into this blending and commingling of cultures that was sort of robbing me of my influence in terms of shaping the mindset, because I saw that it was all about mindset. It was all about beliefs that were passed from parent to child, from parent to parent, from teacher to child, teacher to parent. There were all of these interactions in which influence was happening. I was very aware of that, and because I was so aware, I was also trying to manage and intervene at every level that I saw going on. And that's my holistic systems thinking kind of orientation that I can now name as systems thinking. But I saw the whole picture. And as a I think what you would say is an empathic person, I also felt a lot of the dynamics between parent and child, parent and parent, teacher and parent, teacher and child. I felt all of the relationships, and because I was trying to lead, intervene, and manage in all of them, I became more and more, I was spread thinner and thinner as the school grew. So as my financial metrics got better in terms of what you'd call success in a business, at the numerical level, my own personal experience was declining. So I felt more exhausted and more emotionally drained and more frustrated with my inability to change these dynamics or influence people or create the culture that I wanted. And more and more isolated, because I saw there was a growing number of people in my community, and so that balance was out of favor to me because I was always the single entity among the many. So, I kept trying to do things the way I knew them, which was, okay, if I grow the business, get more students, then I can get into a bigger, a permanent space where I'm paying a lease for a space that's mine instead of, renting hourly and having to move my things in and out every day, which I did for 4 years. I became a master of hauling things. If I just got bigger, then I could hire somebody as an assistant, some part of this could be offloaded. And I remember just never being able to figure out which part of that could be offloaded, because I would always, no matter what, I would carry the overall responsibility for the culture and the mindset and this awareness of all the dynamics of all the people and all the relationships. I couldn't ever let go of that. Even if I handed off some of the quote unquote Brent work to others, that was fun to me. The teaching was fun. The part that was draining was actually feeling all this stuff and trying to establish some sort of influence over the interpersonal dynamics that I was observing and the healing that needed to happen in families. So it was so holistic. It was so far beyond teaching violin. It was incredible. And this is because of my perspective, how I saw things. Because I could have just punched the clock and taught violin. And many of them probably wouldn't have known the difference, because I would still have been delivering a very high quality level of violin instruction. But it wasn't what I wanted to do. It's not why I wanted to start a violin school. I wanted to have a community of a certain mindset and a certain kind of development happening with people. So I'm not sure why I got onto this big description of that part. But so the part of the story that I generally don't tell, and it's true that I don't usually tell the beginning part either, but the part that lends itself less easily to just this sort of generic storytelling is what happened after I got into the office space. So I'm really, the numbers are really running at this point, and the growth curve is there, and I have this beautiful space, and things are very vibrant. It's like I couldn't locate my enthusiasm anymore, and I couldn't locate my own source of energy that I'd always had so much of. I just remember in the Christmas vacation of 2008, and I always got on an airplane at both Thanksgiving and Christmas to go home to the Midwest. But that year, I just remember feeling like the last thing I want to do is get on another airplane. I just want to, lie down somewhere. I did get on the airplanes, but I chose to take most of my Christmas break of 2008 and go to New Mexico, go to Santa Fe, because it's somewhere I'd always wanted to go. And I hadn't really ever taken a personal vacation since I started the school. I was doing a lot of travel for the school with the touring with the kids, and the rest of the time I was teaching. So this was my first personal vacation. I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I rented a little casita, and I just sat there, and I took a yoga class, a different yoga class every day, and I just wandered, and I was just on no one's schedule and no timetable, and no one else's opinion was in the picture. It was just me. And I remember that being exactly what I wanted. And I knew nothing else about what I wanted other than I wanted to find some sense of community and colleagues. And which I feel like I didn't have, because I wasn't like all the other violin teachers who went to music school and just came out and started teaching. I had all this other background, all this other experience, and all this other ambition to bring these other qualities to the experience of music. And I knew its applicability because I'd been in these other worlds, and I saw that, yes, these are life skills. And I couldn't really talk to anyone about that. And I couldn't talk to the CEOs about violin because they never played. They played sports, not music. So I just remember thinking, I don't know. On this trip to Santa Fe, I just surrendered to not knowing. and a few days after I got back is when I found this conference that was a gathering of mentors. It was by Eric Liu in Seattle. It was this conference called Guiding Lights. And it was unlike any other conference in that it was just anyone in any field from any walk of life who considered themselves a mentor or wanted to learn about mentoring. And there were these great core experiences of ballroom dancing, compassionate listening, command presence, like learning from a Marine drill sergeant how to use your voice to lead a room, and a fourth one and contact improv. So there were these 4 core experiences that everyone went through, and then you had a bunch of other options for breakout sessions. So I thought it was so cool that a conference would get people together and say, this is what we all have to do, is learn group rhythm and collaboration through dance, contact improv, so being in our bodies, communicating that way, listening, and then using our voice. And how awesome is that to see as the core experience. And that's where I met my first spiritual teacher, I call her, Gail Larson, of Santa Fe, New Mexico, who, they gave like 30-second pitches for their breakout sessions, all the presenters. And the minute she stepped forward on that stage and I saw her, I just knew there was something about her that I wanted to experience. It was her presence. It was her breathing. And she gave a pitch about her program, which was real speaking. And I went to her session, and it wasn't so much the session, but her presence and her ability to meet people and coach them, and the fact that she's in Santa Fe, and just it opened up a new world for me, that I immediately bought her book and decided that I was going to go to study with her. I didn't know when or how I was going to make that happen, but I decided in that moment that that was what I needed. Whatever that was. I didn't even really know. It was just something I felt. So that was January of 2009, and her next workshop was in June. And it took me those 6 months or 5 months of really agonizing over, could I do it? Could I take that time off in the middle of the summer and not teach? And what I really wanted to do was take the entire month of June off. After doing all these performances, going on tour, bringing another big group to Chicago, could I have the audacity to take the whole month of June off for myself just to, kind of recoup? And it actually, I waffled back and forth thinking, no, no, no. And by the time, sort of 2 months later in March, was when I started to come home from work every day with increasing back pain, and to the point where on my Thursday, which was the end of my teaching week, I remember having one particular day where I was immobilized by pain. I was in bed, just coming home, lying down on my bed and not being able to get up because my whole back was in pain. And it wasn't like it came on suddenly through an injury. It was just this kind of whole back pain, tingling that couldn't be ignored. And for me, I took the message to mean, now is the time to stop. You have to do something differently. I knew I had to go back to my yoga practice, which was my main self-care practice that I had really abandoned in favor of the quicker connection to my body, which was working out at the gym, going to spinning class. It was more efficient. So that's what I was doing mainly at that time. I wasn't taking the space and the time to do yoga. So I took that spring break and I just did yoga. I stayed in California. I didn't travel anywhere. And I just did yoga every day. And I decided that I was going to take that month off, and I had to face the demons in my head that were saying that parents will think you're lazy and not dedicated, and they'll think something's wrong with you, that you're weak, you have to take time off. But I just knew it was that signal of the back pain that said, you need to do this now. And there's a whole other story that unfolds after I actually go to Santa Fe. But I wanted to say that it's so important for me to share what I've experienced since then, since that moment of surrender, since the moment of reaching the point where my body said something to me which I interpreted to mean now is the time to change. Those are the moments when we're asked to restore sanity to our existence. And burnout is a call, a deeper call. So the surface is burnout. We can describe it very clinically and very accurately and study it from the outside, and that's fine. But the deeper call of a burnout experience, I like the one I described where it's about giving, it's about a compassion burnout, it's about a dedication burnout, it's about pouring yourself into something in a way that brings back to you this experience of burnout, that it's actually not sustainable. So this deeper call is a call to find sanity, to restore sanity. And this beautiful journey of when you get to the bottom, this trough, and I describe that as that moment of surrender of, I don't know anymore, I'm just at the end of my rope. All I know is I can't do it anymore. Either physically I've been immobilized, or psychologically I am out of strategies, or energetically I have none left to give. Whatever that valley is the moment of I don't know, and that's where everything starts to be born. The recovery starts there. The recovery of sanity begins in the truth of the moment when you surrender to the fact that you don't know. So the more we resist it, and we can't pretend that we've reached that point either. So there's false victimhood that doesn't work. It doesn't apply in the same way because it's false. I'm talking about the authentic place of full surrender that you only get to. You don't decide when it's going to happen, but you know when it's happening at some deep level, and you acknowledge it, and at that moment you decide to acknowledge it. And that's such a profound truth-telling moment. And it's the awakening of the discovery process that leads to a restoration of sanity. And I've talked about this before, and I'll talk about it again. What is sanity? Sanity is knowing your true identity, having the experience of being here now in your body, in the place that you are in this moment. And I would add a third component to sanity. It's seeing your world through eyes of sanity. Clear eyes, seeing reality as it is through your eyes. So knowing that you're seeing your world through your eyes. So it's knowing your true identity. It's having the experience in your body of right here, right now, and being aware that you're seeing your world through your eyes, your perspective. And those, for me, were each journeys in and of themselves to come to a knowledge of my true identity, that I'm not my job. My job is something I choose to do at certain points in my life. And every day I choose to show up in that role. But it's not who I am. So the idea of doctor, it's a name, it's a word, but it's not the identity. It's not the true identity of a person. And that's where we get mixed up. That's where we get confused, and we overlap the name with the thing itself. And in order to be sane, we need to be able to distinguish between the name of the thing and the thing itself, and the experience of the thing. And I have a great metaphor that I use for that. It's a can of tomatoes. So if you think about a can of tomatoes, and if someone had never tasted a tomato before, never experienced a tomato, well, how would you tell them what's in that can? Well, there's a label on the outside, and it has maybe a picture of a tomato, so you could kind of point to it and say, look, a tomato's this round thing that's red, grows on a vine, it's kind of squishy. Inside there's seeds and juice and this flesh, and it looks kind of like that. And then you could show them the word tomato. It's spelled Tomato. And you could talk to them about how you could use tomatoes for sauce, you could put it in salad, you could do all these things, you could make salsa. But until they taste the tomato, which is inside the can, they won't have the experience of a tomato. So they can know a lot about a tomato. They could know the spelling of the word, how it looks, in images, and they could even open up the can and then start to experience the smell, the texture, the taste. And you could both do that. You could open the can, and you've had all this discussion and looked at the label and had these sensory experience, and then taste it. And you're each tasting it. But can you ever verify what that person's experience of the taste of the tomato is? No, it's their own. So they're creating the experience and idea of tomato from that taste and from all that other discussion, and it's all relevant. It's all part of what a tomato is. But any one of those things isn't the tomato itself. So that's my analogy for true identity, true self. Who are you? Well, I could tell you what I do for a living, where I live, how I grew up, my story. All these labels. I could show you a picture of me, show you a video of me, show you how I live. And then you're seeing me through your eyes. You're tasting me through your taste. So I actually don't know what your experience of me is. I might ask you to tell me, and then I could have a little more idea. But still, it's my experience of your words and what you're relating to me. So the essence of who we are is our experience of ourself. And once we can come into that kind of awareness that, wow, it's like we're not this outside, we're not this, the labels and the descriptors of who we are, which are ego identities, constructs from society, or convenient names that we use to get around. But we're this substance that is coming through us, that's living through us, and that we are observing and experiencing and tasting with our own awareness and consciousness. So we can never really fully put words to it. And we can't really experience it until we've really tasted it ourselves. So we can try to describe that taste afterwards, after we've experienced it. But all the rest of it is just names, labels, and words. So coming to that true identity, and then coming into the bodily experience, which is a universe in and of itself, to experience your body in this moment through the breath and through sensation and through, again, awareness. It's another journey. And then to experience your perception of the world as another journey. Perception, imagination, and your ability to see. Who is the seer in your world? This is what awakens when we turn on the desire to restore sanity. And normal day-to-day life in a culture does not support sanity. And it does not necessarily provide you with spaces to restore your sanity. In fact, we stay very busy with other activities to function in our social world that are maybe actually the opposite of sanity. So this is the beauty that I see in burnout, and why the more time I spend with this, I feel more and more of a friendship. So befriending burnout as this really, really beautiful and benevolent opportunity to wake up and restore sanity to our world by restoring sanity to ourselves first, and bringing our sane eyes back to the world, seeing the world through sane eyes, and allowing that to ripple out and create a sphere of sanity around us. This is how we heal ourselves and the planet. And so I embrace burnout. I embrace the delicate process of recovery. I embrace the beauty that arises when we enter into it. And I embrace the imaginations that will come alive through that process and give birth to a new, saner world.